expectations for the budget on the economic front, primarily centered around three core areas. First, fiscal management. Second, inflation. And third is growth. Now, these have been put in a particular order because fiscal management at this point of time is extremely important. What we expect the government to do is come out with a very robust fiscal consolidation plan that is focused on two primary areas. One, a very targeted and focused divestment policy, effectively looking at meeting divestment targets that are set at the beginning of the year. And secondly, around rationalization of subsidies. Clearly, we are seeing subsidies, particularly food and fuel and fertilizer subsidies, have been an area of discontent. And we expect some clarity on this front just to make sure that the entire subsidy program is effective and does not add too much on the expenditure side. The second aspect, which is quite important, is inflation management. And inflation has been typically something where over the past 24 months, we've seen the economy struggle with. Inflation in India is primarily driven by the supply side at this point of time, which means that effective movement of, let's say, commodities from farm to market is inefficient, and that adds on to the price. So we expect some level of clarity from the government to tackle particularly supply side bottlenecks, which in turn will make inflation decrease. What is also important to note from the RBI perspective, recently our entire inflation management system has moved from a focus on WPI, which is Wholesale Price Index, to CPI, which is Consumer Price Index. Recently, the Urjit Patel Committee report had laid an inflation target of about 6%, though in reality we see inflation, particularly CPI inflation, be around 8.6%. And this is again driven largely by food and fuel. So we expect again something from the government to make sure that our inflation gets addressed in a way that it reaches the target which has been set by the RBI. Last but not the least, I've mentioned growth. Now, growth is always something which we aspire to. From an Indian perspective, growth has suffered. We've seen GDP drop from numbers of about 9% down to about 5% and even below. And the main reason why this is happening is because the industrial sector is suffering, which is, if you look at the numbers of the industrial sector, we see that the industrial sector has actually contracted over the last year. Therefore, there needs to be some focused plan on the industrial sector, particularly from the government, to provide incentives and make sure that there's a robust implementation plan in place to revive the industrial sector and get it back on the path of growth. Within the industrial sector, two areas again which have suffered. One is manufacturing and the second is mining. And the reasons for that is obvious. We expect some level of focus on small and medium scale enterprises, particularly because these are the sectors which have suffered because of inflation. And secondly, once industry is back on track, automatically we will see growth come back. Again, to address growth, another area is services, and services growth has really been something which is keeping the GDP numbers at about 4.5 to 5%. But services growth itself has come down over the past few years, and that is largely because of global competition. Therefore, some level of expectation is there that the government will come out with even a proactive services policy to try and make Indian services more competitive, effectively the way it used to be about a decade back. And secondly, address head-on the competitiveness issues that we are seeing coming from some of the other countries such as Philippines. So overall, three aspects. One is fiscal management, prudent fiscal policy making. Secondly, inflation containment. And third, growth focused on industry and services.